Russian commanders thought they were safe. Now they're getting blown to pieces, 40 miles behind the front line. Ukraine's F-16s and Mirage 2000s just changed everything. Armed with French AASM Hammer bombs, they're wiping out Russian command posts with deadly precision, and there's nothing Moscow can do to stop it. This isn't air support, it's an assassination campaign from the sky, and no one thought Ukraine would pull it off this fast. So what are these smart bombs? How are Ukrainian pilots flying missions once thought impossible, and why are Russian officers scrambling for cover? Let's break it down. The ASUM Armament Air Sol Modulaire, or Modular Air-to-Ground Weapon, is a precision-guided munition system developed by French defense contractor Safran Electronics and Defense. Known as the Hammer, these weapons represent some of the most sophisticated air-to-ground ordnance currently deployed in combat environments worldwide. The ASUM is technically only a guidance kit that transforms standard bombs into precision-guided weapons. The system consists of three main components: a nose-mounted guidance kit, a rear-mounted range extension kit with deployable wings, and a central body that houses the weapon's electronic systems. What makes the ASUM particularly formidable is its modular guidance design. All variants feature GPS INS for all-weather capability, while specific versions add either infrared guidance for enhanced precision or laser guidance for engaging moving targets. This flexible architecture ensures accuracy under virtually any combat conditions, day or night, rain or shine. One of the hallmarks of the ASUM is a circular error probable, or CEP, which is a measure of the weapon's accuracy, of less than 1 meter, meaning half of all bombs dropped will land within 1 meter of the intended target. The numbers tell the story of its devastating potential. The ASUM has an operational range of up to 40 miles when released from a high enough altitude, allowing Ukrainian fighters to launch from well outside the range of most Russian air defense systems. The bombs can be equipped to carry between 250 and 2,200 pounds of explosives, allowing the operators to scale the bomb's yield based on the operational parameters. Perhaps most importantly, the ASUM features a fire-and-forget capability. Once programmed and released, the bomb flies itself to the target, allowing the launching aircraft to immediately disengage and escape potential threats. The ASUM's effectiveness in Ukraine stems from several key factors. 1. The standoff range keeps Ukrainian aircraft outside the engagement envelope of most Russian air defenses. 2. Its precision minimizes collateral damage while maximizing the effect on the target. 3. Its modular nature allows it to be adapted to multiple aircraft types, and 4. Its autonomous guidance reduces pilot workload during critical phases of combat missions. For Russian forces accustomed to relative safety behind their lines, the introduction of these weapons represents a paradigm shift. Command posts that once operated with impunity must now constantly relocate or risk precision strikes from distances previously considered safe. How did Ukraine achieve this remarkable transformation of its air capabilities? When Russia launched its full-scale invasion in 2022, Ukraine's air force consisted primarily of Soviet-era aircraft, MiG-29 fighters, Su-27 fighters, and Su-25 attack aircraft. While these platforms have been upgraded over the years, they lack the sophisticated avionics and weapons integration capabilities of their Western counterparts, particularly with NATO's intelligence and surveillance systems. The journey toward integration of Western precision munitions began gradually. First came the adaptation of Ukraine's existing Soviet platforms to carry Western weapons. Through determined engineering efforts, Ukrainian technicians managed to integrate various Western munitions into their legacy aircraft, despite the significant technical challenges involved in marrying Eastern platforms with Western ordnance. The Su-25, Ukraine's workhorse ground attack aircraft, was among the first to receive modifications allowing it to employ precision-guided weapons. Though never designed with such capabilities in mind, Ukrainian engineers developed improvised solutions that provided at least basic precision strike capabilities. Ukraine's MiG-29 fleet followed, with more extensive modifications enabling these fighters to carry and deploy a wider range of Western munitions. These adaptations, while impressive, still faced fundamental limitations imposed by the aircraft's original design parameters and aging avionics architecture. The real breakthrough came with France's decision to donate Mirage 2000 fighters to Ukraine, aircraft capable of deploying ASUM-enhanced bombs. The Mirage's advanced fire control system and fully digital architecture provided Ukraine with one of its first modern precision strike platforms. Additionally, France reportedly delivered approximately 50 ASUM kits per month starting in January 2024. Furthermore, by early 2025, the long-awaited F-16s began arriving in larger numbers. The F-16 is yet another fighter jet that can more readily integrate ASUM munitions due to its more modern design and avionics. Though the initial discussion of F-16 transfers began all the way back in 2023, there were several setbacks to the plans. The complex logistics of preparing aircraft, training pilots and maintenance personnel, and establishing the necessary support infrastructure, combined with Russia's increasing saber-rattling with nuclear threats should Ukraine receive F-16s. This meant that F-16s only really began flying in August 2024. But after the initial aircraft showed promise and Russian threats turned out to be empty, Ukraine has reportedly received between 85 and 91 F-16s from various donor nations, primarily the Netherlands, Denmark, Belgium, and Norway. These aircraft represent multiple variants and block upgrades of the F-16, ranging from the older Block 15 models to the more sophisticated Block 50-52 versions. What makes this progress truly remarkable is the speed with which Ukraine's pilots and ground crews have adapted to these entirely new systems. Ukrainian pilots trained on Soviet aircraft with fundamentally different design philosophies and operating procedures have successfully transitioned to Western fighters in months rather than the years typically required for retraining. But do the new aircraft really have that much impact on the state of the war? On one side, the benefits of integrating F-16s into Ukraine's arsenal cannot be overstated. First, these aircraft offer substantially improved survivability compared to Ukraine's Soviet-era fighters. The F-16's electronic warfare suite, reduced radar cross-section, and superior maneuverability all contribute to higher survival rates in contested airspace. Second, the precision strike capabilities of both countries far exceed what was previously possible. With advanced targeting pods and fully integrated Western weapons, F-16s can deliver munitions with accuracy measured in meters rather than tens of meters, dramatically reducing collateral damage while increasing effectiveness. Third, psychological impact cannot be overlooked. The presence of Western fighters in Ukrainian skies sends a powerful message about continued international support while simultaneously affecting Russian morale. Fourth, the F-16's multi-role capabilities allow Ukraine to address multiple mission requirements with a single platform, from air defense to ground attack to suppression of enemy air defenses. However, there are still some underlying issues for the planes and their integration into Ukraine's war strategy. The donated F-16s represent older variants that were being phased out of their original air forces. Many airframes have accumulated high flight hours, increasing maintenance requirements and potentially reducing reliability under combat conditions. This new lease of life for aging aircraft means Ukraine is operating platforms that, while superior to their previous inventory, still lag behind Russia's most advanced fighters. The F-16s delivered to Ukraine typically lack the advanced capabilities of Block 70-72 models. Even if the planes received substantial upgrades before being transferred over, as some reports suggested, the actual state of the plane's base could dampen its usable lifespan. Of course, for the time being, all the Ukrainian planes feasibly have to do is survive from 1 year to the next. Instead of a 25-year lifespan, Ukraine is hoping to get at least 5 years. Logistics presents another substantial challenge. The transition from Soviet to Western aircraft requires establishing entirely new supply chains for spare parts, creating new maintenance facilities and training personnel on unfamiliar platforms, all while sustaining combat operations. Perhaps most critically, Ukraine faces a pilot shortage. While aircraft can be donated relatively quickly, developing qualified F-16 pilots requires years of training. Ukraine has been forced to prioritize converting its most experienced pilots to Western aircraft, potentially creating experience gaps in its remaining Soviet fleet. Despite that, the sheer frequency with which Ukraine has been sending out its newfound fleet points to the simple fact that the country utterly depends on any kind of technological advantage or even parity to survive the war. And that's perhaps best illustrated in how Ukraine has started to target Russia's contemporary anti-air defenses. According to Ukrainian military statements, around 50 S-300 and S-400 air defense systems have been destroyed or severely damaged since January 2025, making up a significant portion of Russia's anti-air capabilities. In particular, the S-400, a system with an effective range spanning 248.5 miles, practically prohibited Ukrainian fighters from trying to enter Russia's airspace or even conduct defensive missions near the Ukraine-Russia border or the Donbass front. These successes stem from a coordinated campaign using multiple weapon systems. HARM anti-radiation missiles supplied by the United States and integrated into both F-16s and adapted MiG-29s have systematically targeted Russia's radar systems, creating temporary gaps in coverage. Precision artillery, particularly HIMARS and ATACMS missiles, have struck fixed air defense sites identified through signal intelligence and satellite reconnaissance. Special operations forces have conducted sabotage operations against air defense sites in occupied territories, sometimes penetrating dozens of kilometers behind Russian lines. Electronic warfare platforms have successfully mapped Russian air defense networks by analyzing their electromagnetic emissions, building a comprehensive picture of coverage gaps. Additionally, Ukraine has systematically targeted Russian ammunition depots with unprecedented effectiveness. According to open-source intelligence analyses, at least 4 major Russian munitions storage facilities out of 7 in total have been destroyed, severely constraining Russia's ability to sustain high-intensity artillery operations. The most recent Russian loss is in the Vladimir region, less than 50 miles from Moscow itself, with the depot possibly containing more than 100,000 tons of munitions. These depots were responsible for storing and transferring missiles for both armored vehicles and anti-air systems. Without them, the modern S-400s are essentially glorified radar systems, relying on short-range munitions only as a last-ditch defense effort against Ukrainian aircraft. These combined efforts have created an environment where Ukrainian aircraft can operate with greater freedom than at any previous point in the conflict. Of course, Ukraine is not the only one in the war using glide bombs, the system that is practically reshaping aerial warfare throughout the conflict. These weapons, conventional bombs fitted with wing kits to extend their range, have become the preferred standoff munition for both Russian and Ukrainian forces. Russian forces began employing Fab 500 M62 bombs, equipped with universal gliding and correction modules in early 2023. These relatively crude adaptations transformed Soviet-era unguided bombs into standoff weapons with ranges exceeding 30 miles. Despite their limited accuracy, these weapons have been employed in devastating area bombardment tactics against Ukrainian cities and frontline positions. The statistics are sobering. Russian forces reportedly drop between 100 and 150 glide bombs daily across the front, with particularly heavy concentrations in the Donetsk and Kharkiv regions. While individual accuracy remains poor, the sheer volume creates significant destruction. Ukraine's response has been qualitatively different. Rather than matching Russia's volume, Ukrainian forces have focused on precision. The introduction of ASUM and other Western precision glide weapons have allowed Ukraine to conduct surgical strikes against specific, high-value targets rather than area bombardment. This difference in approach reflects both capability constraints and philosophical differences. Ukraine lacks Russia's industrial capacity to produce glide bombs in massive quantities, but possesses superior targeting intelligence and more accurate guidance systems. Alongside this glide bomb revolution, unmanned aerial systems have continued their rapid evolution. What began as simple reconnaissance drones have developed into a complex ecosystem of platforms. First-person view or FPV kamikaze drones now constitute a primary anti-armor capability for both sides, with thousands deployed daily across the front lines. These systems, often assembled from commercial components costing less than $1,000, have destroyed equipment worth millions. Loitering munitions, such as Ukraine's domestic Ram-2 and Western-supplied systems, have created a new category of threat that blurs the line between drone and missile. These systems can loiter over potential target areas for hours before striking, creating psychological pressure on Russian forces who never know when an attack might come. Counter-drone warfare has consequently become a primary focus for both sides. Russia deploys extensive electronic warfare assets to jam drone control signals, while Ukraine has developed increasingly sophisticated autonomous navigation capabilities to counter these measures. The integration of these various aerial capabilities, fighter aircraft, precision munitions, and diverse drone systems has created a multi-layered threat environment unprecedented in modern warfare. The skies over Ukraine have become a laboratory for future air combat concepts, with lessons that will influence military doctrine for decades to come. However, this particular war might not get to last that long. According to Medusa's analysis of Russia's 2025 budget, military expenditures now account for more than 40% of total government spending, more than healthcare and education combined, raising serious questions about how long the country can maintain this level of militarization without collapsing other vital sectors. This massive allocation reflects fundamental changes in Russia's economic structure. Industrial production has been extensively reoriented toward military requirements. Factories previously producing civilian goods have been converted to defense production, with the Russian government employing Soviet-era mobilization plans to prioritize military outputs. Labor markets show the impact of this shift, with defense enterprises offering salaries 30 to 40% above market rates to attract workers. Reports indicate approximately 3.5 million Russians now work directly in Russia's military-industrial complex, out of an estimated 10 million people working in industrial production. Raw material allocation is increasingly controlled by central authorities, with strategic metals and chemicals prioritized for military applications over civilian uses. This has created shortages in consumer goods sectors while ensuring defense production continues uninterrupted. The economic consequences for Russian society have been substantial. Inflation officially stands at 10%, though independent economists estimate the real figure to be closer to 20%. Consumer goods availability has declined markedly, with imports restricted by sanctions and domestic production redirected to defense requirements. Yet despite these challenges, Russia's wartime economy has proven more resilient than many Western analysts anticipated. For one, high energy prices through 2023 provided substantial revenue cushions before sanctions began to significantly impact export volumes. Russia skirted Western sanctions by offloading its oil and gas exports to countries like China and India, with the former becoming by far Russia's most important trading partner. More importantly, Russia has essentially accepted economic regression as the price of continuing its war. By sacrificing future economic development for current military capability, the Russian government has created a sustainable wartime economy, albeit one that increasingly resembles the stagnant late Soviet model. But what might the future hold as these new capabilities are brought to bear, especially with Ukraine's air fleet getting more freedom of movement and operations? Ukraine's recent incursion into Russia's Belgarod region builds upon lessons learned from the 2024 Kursk operation. Unlike that earlier offensive, which prioritized territorial gains to provide positive stress with NATO under Biden's leadership, the current operation appears focused on disrupting Russian logistics and command structures. According to military analysts, Ukraine has deployed personnel in a targeted offensive that penetrates only a few miles into Russian territory at specific points. These forces are primarily mechanized infantry supported by artillery and drones, with air assets providing periodic precision strikes against identified high-value targets. What makes this operation particularly significant is its coordination with Ukraine's evolving air campaign. While ground forces fix Russian defensive assets in place, F-16s and other platforms deliver precision strikes against command nodes and logistics hubs, supporting Russian operations to the Kharkiv region and the front as a whole. So rather than seeking to hold territory like in Kursk, there are even more layers to Ukraine's strategy. First, Russia has been forced to divert resources from offensive operations elsewhere along the front to defend its own territory. In fact, Russia tried to transfer troops from Kursk to Belgarod almost immediately in response to the incursion, but a series of vital precision strikes have disrupted those efforts, severing key supply lines and forcing Russian units to spread thin across the front. While it's too early to say Ukraine holds a commanding lead in the region, their tactics have clearly thrown Russian defenses off balance, compelling Moscow to respond with a mix of infantry maneuvers and high-intensity air and missile strikes to contain the breach. Secondly, Ukraine has proved that they can invade Russia not once but twice in as many years. This will generate a significant psychological impact on Russian society by demonstrating Ukraine's ability to penetrate Russian borders despite Moscow's claims of territorial security. More importantly, it can force the Russian military command to reconsider its efforts and try to change strategies. This is something the Russian military doctrine has had severe difficulties with in the past, leaving the military open to making more mistakes that Ukraine can capitalize on. Third, the strikes exploit a fundamental asymmetry in the conflict that is in Ukraine's favor, for a change. Ukraine can strike targets in Russia that are responsible for producing long-range weapons and ordnance, but Russian forces cannot do the same, as they come from NATO countries instead. Finally, in the light of the US administration under President Donald Trump pressuring both Ukraine and Russia to come to a diplomatic resolution of the conflict, Ukraine holding pieces of Russian land gives it far more leverage to accept or decline proposals. Looking forward, Ukraine appears focused on systematically degrading Russia's ability to sustain high-intensity operations rather than seeking dramatic territorial gains. The Belgorod incursion is only meant as a means to an end and will likely contain minuscule offensives compared to the Kursk invasion last year. This approach recognizes the reality of Russia's numerical advantages, particularly in land troop sizes and logistical capabilities. On the flip side, Ukraine has proved that it can maintain and build upon NATO's more advanced precision systems, adaptive military doctrine, reliability of emergent drone capabilities, particularly of low-cost FPV drones that it largely produces independently, and better troop cohesion at the lowest command levels. Perhaps the most important aspect of the war in Ukraine is the overwhelming support that Europe has provided. The invasion served as a wake-up call to many European countries, which have since vowed to practically transform their militaries and modernize their military-industrial complexes. Russia has proven to be an inadvertent geopolitical partner for the continent, and some military analysts are suggesting a potential NATO-Russia war within the decade. Ukraine will benefit from this in the short term by receiving all of NATO's old and aging supplies as it starts producing more modern pieces. However, NATO is also looking at Ukraine for a long-term investment. Several countries have donated weapon and equipment prototypes in the hope of receiving vital, real-world data to fine-tune them. Given that the alliance's most pressing concern is Russia, and that the latter will likely need to start using more and more of its contemporary equipment and tactics, Ukraine serves as the perfect testing ground for Western capabilities moving forward. Furthermore, Europe has started taking a more hardline stance of reinforcing Ukraine's territorial sovereignty and its ambitions to join NATO, a move that partially sparked the war in the first place. With this in mind, the US administration will likely play a pivotal role in the evolution of the war in the coming year. Within his first 100 days in office, Trump has made sweeping policy changes that could transform global geopolitical relations. That uncertainty could be dangerous for both Russia and Ukraine, as it's practically impossible to predict the outcome of the war, given how much Ukraine depends on NATO donations and US-provided intelligence. Ultimately, Ukraine managing to leverage its fighter jets directly against Russia represents sizable progress that Russia itself can't claim to have achieved, giving Ukraine yet another lever to pull in determining how to respond to Russia's continued aggression. But make no mistake, the F-16s and Mirages are only a single step in that direction. There are plenty of steps left to overcome for Ukraine. But what do you think? Will Ukraine capitalize on newfound F-16 and Mirage capabilities, or will Russia start ramping up another aspect of its aggression in response? Thanks for watching, and leave your comments below.